Okay, this is about why my PhD applies to the work that I do now, because I don't think it's so clear. My PhD is in public policy and management. I got that from Carnegie Mellon, the Heinz School. One of the reasons I chose the Heinz School is because they're very quantitative in their approach, very scientific in their approach, to policy, which is often considered kind of a soft science or an art. Um, Policy. And I don't know if most people would describe it this way, but this is how I would describe it and how some of my professors would describe it is the act of trying to get people to behave in a way that you want them to behave without forcing them to do it. So I'll give an example. I cannot force anybody to stop at a stop sign. As a driver in control of a car and the way the cars work and the way streets work and the way you can't force anyone to stop at a stop sign. But as a policymaker, your goal is to create an environment to incentivize people to stop at stop signs. And we do it several different ways. Um, One way is that people are very aware of is the punitive way. So we say, if you don't do it and we have someone watching or we got a camera watching or a police officer, you will be fined. There will be a punishment for not doing the thing that we want you to do. But that's not the only way to incentivize someone to do something. So, in addition, we have things like making sure that stop signs are red and uniform and the same shape. And we teach them in driver's training so everybody knows what a stop sign is, everybody knows what's expected at a stop sign, and everybody knows the penalty if you don't do that. And there are other things you can do in policy to help encourage behavior, like you do public relations information around kids getting hit at intersections where people don't stop at stop signs. You appeal to people's emotion, you appeal to their own drivers, their own self-interest, and connect that to the behavior that you desired. And so policy is not about like controlling people, even though some people try and maybe think that that's what it is or try to use it that way. Policy is really, especially when it's done well, it's creating the environment and incentivizing our environment to get people to behave in the way that's ideally best for themselves and best for the community if you can get both at the same time. And so I'm now understanding the more I talk to people about what I do and why my approach is different than some of the standard approaches out there is because I never think it's anyone's job to try and control or make someone do or be different than they are. I think, there are other uh, disciplines or professions where that may be the goal or the approach. But I'm always coming from the lens of how do you create the environment that supports you in making your own decision with your own agency to get where you want to go. And so data is great for that. Data is, I would argue, absolutely essential and necessary for that conversation and absolutely required to do this well. And the last thing I'll say is one of the ways that you really see policy in place is if you travel to different countries. I think that's one of my favorite things to do is to travel to different countries and watch their traffic and see how they decided to make their traffic laws. Barbados is entirely different than Paris, which is entirely different than, say, Benin, where I was in, like Ouidah, which is entirely different than DC, which is also very different than New York. Um, Traffic is a really good example of what policy looks like in different places and why they make the decisions that they make. I can talk about this like forever, but I think that's all I've got to say about this for now.